I don't think that's not going to do it.
Oh, that was weak. Let's try it again.
All right, let's try one again. Howdy.
There you go. Much, much better.
But
we can do even better yet.
Yeah.
One more time.
For the folks out in the parking lot, we want them to hear there's something amazing going on here. All right. Howdy.
There you go.
That's more like it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, this morning, just to kick us off, we have Dr. Henry Fadamiro. He's our Associate Vice President of Research here. We've got Walt Magnussen. I think probably most of you have known Walt for many years, our Director of Research Development for the ITEC, and myself with the ITEC. Walt, you want to do the welcome?
All right, everyone. Welcome to College Station. Welcome to Texas A&M University, and welcome to the Interoperability Institute. It's about our 7th or 8th institute. We have grown from probably 30 or 40 people out in the field, out in the middle of nowhere, doing not a whole lot of stuff, to the event as it is today. Mostly due to the cooperation and everything else from our supporters that have been out there, that have been working with us for the years. And again, a lot of you, the majority of you, are represented here at this as well. We all know and love and understand that interoperability is very, very important to us. So everything that we do here, we keep that in the forefront. So Michael has gotten more details and information. By the way, Michael didn't mention his title there. So Michael is our executive director. So I wanted to make sure that all of you get a chance to come by, meet him, talk to him, say hi, tell him what's important to you and everything else as we go through the week.
Thanks, Walt. So Interop 2024 brought to you by the ITEC. So what is the ITEC? I know I see some familiar faces, some not. So the ITEC is an applied research center, and we do work for public safety, defense, transportation, energy, and other critical infrastructure. Most of our work involves wireless and next generation systems. And primarily we focus on interoperability and cybersecurity. We've at any one time got 15 to 20 active projects. I listed a few up here, 4G, 5G security, voice security for government installations, mission critical services, and Sidelink work is one of the things we're working on right now. Next generation 911, interoperability and security, and starting to do a lot of work with GPS denied situations and what happens to positioning, navigation, network timing, things like that. So many, many more. That's just a hint of some of the things that we do. You'll be hearing a lot more throughout the week. But one thing I want to point out is ITEC has an amazing lab. We've got a fantastic team. You're going to meet some of them today. You're going to meet more of them if you're around here on Thursday. You'll meet all our engineers who are working tirelessly right now to make sure the whole exercise goes off well. But as good as our center is, we're one of 200 centers in the Texas A&M University. And the Texas A&M University itself has a huge set of resources, as well as the A&M system. So to tell you a little bit more about that is Dr. Henry Fadamiro, and he'll take it from here.
Thank you. Howdy. See, at Texas A&M University, we never get tired of chanting howdy. So I really want to join my colleagues, Michael and Walt, in welcoming you to Interop 2024. To those who are here on our campus for the first time, I'm especially pleased to welcome you to Aggieland, where research and innovation converge and where goals become reality. Many of you may have heard of this cliche, everything is bigger in Texas. It is especially true for Texas A&M University. We are one of the largest public universities in the nation, 77,000 students, with almost 75,000 on our campus here, over 4,000 faculty members, with over 60 of them are National Academy members. I always like to brag on our faculty because they are, and our staff, because they are outstanding group of people. Texas A&M, we have 16 colleges and schools, But beyond that, we are a research one university. Last year, our research expenditure was $1.25 billion, which makes us a top 10 public university. We have the largest public engineering program, the largest public agricultural program in the country. Why am I saying this? It's because our people. We are successful because of our people, because of our faculty, our students, our staff, including some that are, in the audience today. So one other thing I want to mention about our campus is we are one of the few universities that have the classification of a land grant, seed grant, and space grant. So that tells you that impact, societal impact, is what we do here. Everything we do, we're represented because of our extension program. We're represented all over the big state of Texas, over 250 counties. So the reason why I'm saying this is we welcome you to partner with us, because when you partner with us, you have an opportunity to reach audiences that you probably will not be able to reach by yourself. But beyond that, Texas A&M University is part of a larger ecosystem. Next slide, please. We are part of one of the largest university systems in the world, called Texas A&M University System. This includes 11 universities and 8 state agencies. 11 universities listed on the left. We are the Texas A&M College Station is the flagship university. But many of our universities listed here, they are Hispanic serving university. We have one 1890 HBCU University, Prairie View. And we have 8 state agencies listed there, including Texas A&M Department of Emergency Service. Again, why are we saying this? Just to let you know that a whole ecosystem, when you partner with us, you have opportunity to partner with any of these units, any of these agencies. You also have opportunity to reach our 77,000 students. Workforce development is one of our priorities. And innovation also is a priority. We have an innovation campus called RELIS Campus. So that RELIS is an acronym from some of our core values at Texas A&M University. So feel at home. We welcome you. But beyond our immediate university and the university system, we also have external collaborations that ITEC has, really strengthened. And I'm going to hand over to Michael to talk about that and other items.
Thank you, Henry. Yeah, so we've got a lot of resources at the center and the university and the system, but beyond that, one of the things we do exceptionally well is partner. We partner with other academic universities. We're currently working with University of Illinois, University of Puerto Rico, University of the Basques in Spain, Florida State, Columbia, Georgia Tech. Yeah, I can't even remember them all. So we're taking the best and brightest from all around the country and even the world to incorporate into our research projects. Stakeholders, many of you here are first responders or work in first responder organizations. We take that very seriously, and we involve stakeholders in everything we do. Big partners with government, Department of Homeland Security, one of our biggest, but also DoD and others. And then industry. So we have, I showed you a small picture of our lab earlier. We're very thankful for partnerships with industry that provide a lot of equipment and donations and engineering support to be able to show how their stuff works. Now, I'm sure you probably heard presentations where people say, oh yeah, we partner. So it's a little easier said than done. So I went through the registrations for this event. And let me show you a little interesting numbers that I found. So first of all, registered for this event are people from 4 different countries. Austria, England, and Sweden. And then here in the US, 10 states plus DC. I looked at US federal organizations. We have 13 US federal organizations registered for the event. Most of those are in person. I think there's maybe one or two that are going to be remote. We've got 12 state level or DC public safety organizations, quite a few from Washington, DC, one from California. And then, as Henry mentioned earlier, we have this ability to reach all the way across the state. So we're very heavily partnered with Department of Public Safety, with Texas Task Force 1. We do lots of exercises with them, Texas Military Department, which is the Army National Guard, and others. So very, very broad reach. City and county public organizations, 25 are registered for the event here. And then academia, I mentioned we work with a lot of universities. So there's 4 other universities here, plus a variety of organizations within the system. We've got computer science and engineering folks, emergency management folks, technology services, a whole bunch. Industry associations, more stakeholders, right? So these are public safety, first responder oriented associations mostly. Industry, technology industry participants. So 22 different companies represented as participants in the organization, in the workshop and exercise. In addition to those, we have our sponsors and vendors. So our gold sponsors for this event are Verizon and Contech in collaboration with Siligo and Vantique. We've got our silver sponsors and our vendor sponsors. So there's quite a few. In fact, if you add up all the numbers, there's over 100 different organizations registered for this event. And so there's plenty of opportunity for you to network and meet folks that are in similar organizations. Maybe if you're a public safety person talking to a vendor that's here, that type of thing. So please do take advantage. There's lots of opportunities the way we've structured the event. Today's agenda, we're going to start off with a keynote address. Then we're going to move into a panel discussion. Then there's some of that networking I mentioned, a little happy hour and some networking. You'll have an opportunity to take a tour of the Bush Library. And then we're going to have a dinner presentation from Contech, right? And to introduce our keynote speaker, Walt.
All right. So our keynote for this afternoon is Mr. Dan Cotter. So Dan is the director within Science and Technology of Department of Homeland Security, and he's over the first responders group. And the first responders group, my understanding is basically they are kind of the interface liaison between the responders' needs and what's going on within the research community. So Dan has been running that for several years. First had the pleasure of working with Dan back in 2016 when they asked us to come in and support the CAUSE experiments. CAUSE is a Canadian-US resilience experiment, and it was designed to be an exercise where we participated over 3 years, where we did a exercise that involved disasters on the US-Canadian border, and how do Canadian first responders work with US first responders when they're on different networks, different systems, different policies, different rules, and everything else. So we did the first one in Montana, and then from there went to Michigan, and then from there went up to Washington State. So I think it was a very successful experience. And again, Dan led the operation for the United States, and I was very, very honored to be a part of it. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and give to Dan.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Is it mandatory I say howdy before I start, or is that?
Oh, but we got it. So we're good.
Okay, all right. All right. Yeah, no, a pleasure to be here. Always good to be in Texas. I come from Maryland. It took me about 90 minutes to drive from the Houston airport up here yesterday. In Maryland, I could be in like 5 different states in the same amount of time. I actually lived in the Houston area for a while, and kind of grown up in the East Coast. the idea that it's further from Houston to El Paso than it is from El Paso to San Diego. I figured that out was something that just kind of boggled my mind. So yeah, things are definitely big down here. The comments on the research budget of A&M, I think that was $1.25 billion that they were talking to, right? That's 2x at least of what DHS Science Technology has in the way of a research budget, which is part of the reason why it's so critically important to us to be able to come to events such as this, meet people like you, and be able to partner and interact. We're a fairly small group. A big part of our job is to understand what's going on out there and figure out how to transition those things to mission use, but also to get back with our partners, whether in industry, academia, or other agencies, with the requirements of DHS sees that does its mission. So here with me today is John Merrill. Raise your hand, John. Sridhar and Kwang Lu. Kwang, where are you? There, right. So three of our experts are here. With John, you get everything from LORAN to GPS, right? With Sridhar, Kwang Lu, LTE, LMR, P25. If you want your system jammed, talk to Sridhar. He'll arrange a denial of service event for you, the drop of a hat. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. This issue of interoperability is something that personally I'm very passionate about. You can probably guess by my age. Interoperability wasn't necessarily a big thing when I kind of joined the workforce around 1978. I had my rotary phone. I had my acoustic coupling thing that did 600 bits a minute or something like that. And you travel forward to today, and there's numbers out there. So Moore's Law, everybody's familiar with Moore's Law. The idea that about 18 to 24 months, technology is going to be about double. The speed of computing is going to double. Stanford and McKinsey say that AI progress computing power is doubling about every 3 or 4 months now. So think about that. And what does that mean for interoperability when you think about all the new types of technologies that are out there? So, I think this is a critically important thing to talk about. These are the topics that you selected for this workshop. I think any one of them on its own is probably a week or a month's workshop. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about DHS's goals, some of the things they're doing in each one of these spaces, and if I have time, maybe talk a little bit how interoperability in these spaces and what you're doing impacts particularly the emergency management domain, something at DHS we're very interested in and concerned about. So starting out with mission critical push to talk, and I think right after this session, Sridhar, you're going to be leading a panel on this. Good, glad I got that right. Actually, know what people are doing, but these are, if you go to the DHS website, these are the things we talked about being interested in. Standards-based internetworking solutions. How do you enable the communications between land mobile radio and long-term evolution systems? I mean, it's something that, Kwang, you've been at that now for, I feel like 20, 30 years at least. Communications between different LMR systems. And kind of, this whole radio thing, right? The idea that, in this day and age that everybody's radio can't talk to each other, that we're still struggling with that. The work that we've done with P25, with ACO, some of the standards groups, really important solving some of those problems, but we still got a ways to go. How do we internetwork? A big issue. And of course, we're all looking forward to the promise of FirstNet. And I just kind of cut and paste, if you look on the web for FirstNet's approach to mission critical push to talk. I think there's some really good ideas and thinking here about what it takes to make these types of things work, which is a huge effort. Next generation 911. This is an area of all these areas are, but of a lot of very strong interests of the department, in our support to public safety, to the first responder community, to the emergency management community. How do we make sure that these things work together? Assuring standards, which are just emergent, are interoperable, that they're going to be able to conform and work together well within an ecosystem is something that's incredibly important to us. And we're trying to work with a variety of different organizations. Some of the numbers in the sidebar, the amount of public safety answering points out there when you start thinking about interoperability, and if you want to convert somebody to a given standard or a select set of standards, these are enormous governance problems. Who's paying for the switching costs? How do we deal with all these large, institutional problems over time? Really important. The number of the call volume in the US, the 240 million calls, just astounding, right? To think about that number of calls, coming in. And, as somebody who's done a 911 call more than once in my life, there's nothing more than a relief than when somebody answers on the other end of that phone, who's competent, sounds like they know what they're doing, they're gonna get you help. It's just a critical part of, I think all our lives. The amount of people, and I'm one, who've cut the cord, right? And you've no longer got a landline. Now I'm on my wireless device. So, when I'm calling, what's my location? Where am I? But also, the expectation that, oh, I want to send you a picture of what's going on here. Wait, I'll send you the video or some other type of multimedia. And I want to do that, get this to the fire department. They'll know where to go. I'm off this loading dock, right? So within the 911 standards that we're working on, it's not just simply about voice communication, but text, video, images, that whole wealth that our new devices bring to us. And how can you communicate that? How can the end user, the caller, communicate that to the center? And how can they use that information to better inform the responding groups? One of my kind of favorite topics in life is information sharing. This is one of these things that I think that we all make a career of. The top quote there is a key part of DHS's mission. After 9/11, DHS stood up in large measure to try to solve some of these problems of information sharing around criminal and terrorism information between law enforcement communities, intelligence communities, and others. And it remains a challenge, frankly. And I'm sure many of you are involved in things, are very aware of that. Trying to think about information as a national resource and how do we manage that across such diverse groups of organizations? How do we do it in ways that we're protecting people's privacy? DHS holds a huge amount of information, probably about everybody here. Every time you cross into the US or you go through a TSA checkpoint or something, right? How do we protect that information that's non-derogatory information about American and international citizens, and make sure that it's not breached and we don't breach our faith with you by allowing anything to happen with that it shouldn't. At the same time, how do we share derogatory and other types of information with multiple groups, whether it's state and local, other federal agencies, or working with some of our international partners. So I think one of the things that's going to be talked about here in the coming days is the idea of information sharing frameworks. A lot's been kind of done in this space. It's been an emergent space. Anybody here a HISN user member? You're raising your hands like you're embarrassed to admit it. Put them all the way up. Come on, yeah, be good. Or what about RiskNet? Not so much. But these are two major U.S. government elements out there. There's a lot going on at the federal level. I note the IGIS, the Institute for Justice Information Sharing, the number of organizations out there really working hard to promote standards. We've done quite a bit of work with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence on, how do you share secure but unclassified data? There's like over 100 different types of like law enforcement classifications of data. How do you figure all that mess out and get it shared? And then one of the groups we work with is the state of Virginia. They have something called the Flight Information Exchange, where they exchange information on drone activity, other things like that. Nice standards-based thing. Just as an example, there's an awful lot going out in this space. And to make it work, it's going to have interoperability. It's going to have standards. it's going to have standardization. Things like HISN, we have several 100,000 users, right? But there's like 3 million people in the U.S. Public safety arena, at least. So it's kind of a drop in the bucket when you really start talking about it. So when you really start talking about information sharing, really can get to be tremendously complicated. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. One of the things that I'll talk about in a little bit is some of the standards and other things going on there. But one of the things that S&T does do, we are the standards executive for the department. And that function is actually within my office, and John and Sridhar and Kwang, you kind of work with those folks. So, so we do have ways, to try to influence interoperability through the standards function of DHS, and our work with NIST and other organizations. Identity credentialing access management. Again, kind of one of my favorite spaces. I really got involved with this about 20 years ago when the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 12 personal identity verification card, standards came out. And we're trying to figure out how to implement that across the department, and we did that. We had a very successful technical implementation. That didn't mean that I could use my PIV card to go into somebody else's office, right? Because you get this whole policy piece there around, do I really trust you, right? I've got an interoperable piece of technology, but your local physical security person may not think that I'm trustworthy. So even though I'm interoperable and I'm in the same department as you are, I can't get through your door, right? So how do you automate those things, those types of trust? There's something about you that needs to be known, a credential, a training certificate, some of those things. And that's where you're seeing the emergence of organizations that you would call credentialing authority. They're providing something about you that says you can be trusted in an online environment or a physical environment, whatever it may be. So you've got this weird, one of the people I work with described it as a three-way tango. You got, the group, in my case, DHS, and they've issued me this PIV badge, and they've assured my identity. Now I want to get into your network and you're the reliant party. And maybe as a reliant party, well, yeah, you'll accept my identity, but you want to make sure I've done the right privacy training to be in this group. And that's issued by this other credentialing authority. So how do you make all that work together? And there's groups out there like NEAP and others been working these types of problems. But at the end of the day, I'm really convinced that we're just not paying enough attention to the policy issues here, right? At the end of the day, a lot of times in working with, you get a bunch of local law enforcement together, maybe with their fire people, with some state people, a couple of Fed people, and you talk through it. And there's trust issues out there and policy issues that just kind of remain very, very difficult about, who has the right to share what data, who gets to make that decision. Am I going to trust you with, with my data? And there's also a lot of, how many people have like gone and talked to somebody, I need access to your data set. And the person goes, that's my data. That's not your data. That's my data. You can't have my data. And you're like, wait, you're a public official. It's taxpayer data. You have a responsibility to be a steward of data. You have a responsibility to share responsibility with others, not, it's my data. I got it. So there's a lot of issues out there, I think, just kind of cultural issues that persist around just how people who are stewards of data perceive their role, and a lot of people who seem to remain very risk adverse. And they want to know you, see you, have you sign your life and blood before they'll trust you with access to their data. And they're not willing to rely on this three-way tango of identity, credentialing, and reliant party to make that happen in an automated fashion, which is what we need when we want to react quickly and critically in an emergency situation. So this system environment, and this is just an example, you can draw the ones you want. It's becoming a really just an incredibly complex environment when you think of all the types and sources of data out there, where they've been coming from, their levels of security, timeliness, latency, the authoritative, can I trust it? All those types of things. And I would just say that one of the technologies that we're starting to experiment with in DHS as we try to design and kind of build systems, to really understand in advance if they're going to work and what their shortfalls might be is kind of the digital engineering environment. And I won't say more than that about it, but it's a type of thing that I think in the engineering practice, when we're designing and building things, that digital engineering is going to become just increasingly important to us, just because of the sheer complexity of the things we're trying to deal with. Team awareness kits, another thing you had a conversation about. Particularly proud of this one, right? We adapted it from DoD. It's been a good success for us. One of the things that this really gets to is spatial information sharing. A kind of a whole different game than a lot of things that we've been talking about or we looked at in the past. The ability of drones and other types of technologies to bring you up to date, information, spatial awareness is really amazing. Going back, I'd say even 20 years, perhaps, the cost of creating these data sets was very high, and typically, government agencies kind of own spatial data, digital maps, road maps, satellite imagery, things like that. Now, my 90-minute drive from College Station, right? Google, tell me where to go. Waze, tell me if there's any traffic accidents, and if I want a satellite background to see the street view, it's all there. So the fragmentation of who owns the data in a spatial sense has become, I think, an increasing issue for interoperability. I mean, you talk about different systems, different type of standards. People start getting to the engineering world. How is information author rectified? What's the timestamp on it? And a lot of these things really impact how we try to run and drive emergency operations and other types of work in the United States. A lot of work, and we've done some of it's gone on trying to think about spatial information. I'm thinking to the future of NG 911 and other places where you're looking at a map. How do you know it's the right one, right? How do you know it's authoritative? And it's things like symbol sets, just drive me nuts. So we spent a lot of time back in the early 2000s on an ANSI standard for point symbology. And after years of work, we decided a circle with an H on it was the appropriate symbol for a hospital, and get the whole thing published right. And the first thing you find out from the wildfire community is, oh, that's a helicopter landing site. So just the difficulty of getting together all the users in those types of environments and looking at how you can create a standard or understand standardization of use. But the Federal Geographic Data Committee is probably top in the U.S. federal government, at least, for trying to look at standards. They've been trying to drive out something they call the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. There's a plan for that, and it really talks about what the holdings of the federal government are, which are extensive and comprehensive. But at the local level and the private sector level, with critical infrastructure, probably and others, there's much more detailed data. There's much more recent types of data. And how do those things integrate together? So this is one of the groups that's working on it. We did a piece of work, again, with the information sharing executive from the Office of Domestic Intelligence on what geospatial interoperability would look like. And we've kind of put out a reference architecture. And you do these things, you always hope they become a little bit more than shelfware. And every once in a while, OGC or somebody else shows up referencing it and just get all excited. But in a lot of these spaces too, there's this issue of, okay, well, we've got all this data. Who's responsible for doing what with it? And I think a big part of the issue that we're facing with this flooded data and technologies are, whose job is it to do the analysis, and who are they going to give it to? How do we get the right information to the right decision maker in time to make a difference? And I think that remains something that we struggle with. There's some books out there, like The Death of Expertise and things like that. AI in particular has the potential to allow people who otherwise wouldn't have a clue to go in and do stuff, right? Analyze a bunch of data, come up with analysis, and present it and push it somewhere, right? They really know what they're doing. Did the AI really work? There's a lot of these issues that I think we really haven't thought through and we need to think about. And I think the last piece on the track here is primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency planning, PACE. Diagram bearing notes from this SWIC and our friends at CISA. Plans must be feasible, acceptable, sustainable, distinguishable, complete. And kind of reading, this document, kind of thinking through what this means, these are, again, like we talked about next gen 911 conversion, getting everybody on one system. They're pretty expensive, I think, propositions to have, that level of depth. And when you think about that and you do your planning, it always comes back to me, a guy I used to work with those who say, a plan without resources is a hallucination, right? Are we being realistic when we put these plans together about how they're going to work, what's the resource side of it, and when they'll actually become a reality and rolled in? I think too often, sometimes we're afraid to let our leadership know that, well, I got a plan, but it's not really going to happen unless you really step up and provide resources. Otherwise, we just get something that's going to sit on the shelf. And I do worry about that. How many people are familiar with the SafeCom continuum? 1, 2, good. Yeah. More excited about that than his, which is good. So when, I really come out of the sort of technology area, and one of the things that was very revolutionary in my thinking to me about the SafeCom continuum was the SafeCom continuum says it's not all about your technology. Let's get with it, right? It talks about governance. It talks about budget. It talks about use. It talks about training and exercises, and it's a very nice, in effect, capability maturity model that really has you think through some of these issues, right? I've got a great technical standard here. It's the best thing in the world. I'm going to work to implement it. How do I make that happen? And unless you bring in, if you're in the public sector, you need to have support from the people who do the budget, the chief financial officer. You need to have approval from probably the Department of Public Works and others. You need to build those relationships. You need to have the mayor or whoever the chief executive of your public institution understand the benefits of what you're doing that's worth putting money here over than maybe into a playground over here, and bring all those things together. And then to make sure you're actually using it and you're training and exercising it. So when something happens and you really need it, it's truly there and it shows its value. So I think SafeCom, I really like this. I think it's one of those things that, at least for me, really helped change my thinking. We've done some work at DHS, kind of try to build on that, to provide a tool for communities to work with or other organizations. Incident management, information sharing capability maturity model. It's kind of out there on the web. It allows you to do a self-assessment, kind of along the lines that SafeCom would have you do it. Ask you some key questions, it interviews you and kind of gives you back a score. And on a lot of these things, I don't know that it's important for everybody like to be a 4 or 5. And depending on the community you're in, the role you're at, the resources you have, maybe you're fine at level 2 or level 3, right? Maybe the New York Cities and Chicago's need to be at a level 5, but understanding that just because you're at a 1 or a 2, it's not necessarily bad. It may fit what your community needs, but having a way to assess where you're at and what your gaps may meet, I think is really important. And for those of you in local government, I would also state, this type of thing gives you an objective way also, I think, to support grants. Applying for a FEMA grant for this or that, our assessments here, we could, with this investment, we could grow to a different level. Say a couple words about standards. So it kind of tell my favorite standards joke. So I heard this once and it just stuck with me because it's really true. Standards are like toothbrushes. Everybody has one. Nobody wants to use anybody else's. And it's a real problem out there, right? So trying to, I work with another guy says, yeah, standards are great because there's so many of them. And it's true, like there's a proliferation of standards. At times you see, competition isn't too strong a word. You see competition between different, standards development organizations, international standards body over, what their role is, whose lane is what. particularly in today's world when the things you're talking about, which primarily maybe are on the communication side, but how does that interact with standards people are developing for smart cities, for the Internet of Things, for cybersecurity? And the overlays of standards is becoming increasingly important. It's not just that I got TCP/IP, right? So I can do the internet now, right? All of a sudden you have all these other things, and they've got to work together. Our National Institute of Standards and Technology, and I mentioned, we have the standards responsibility for the department. Trying to deconflict these things, trying to drive more collaboration, within the standards development world is something that I think is increasingly important in trying to drive interoperability. And it's exactly the type of thing that I think this forum is great to talk about. I would mention NIEM, National Information Exchange Model. It's something that DHS kind of adopted it from DOJ back in the early 2000s. But one of the things I was after early in my career was the idea that, oh, we'll just have one data model, and everybody will just implement this data model, and everything will be fine, right? Then things are interoperable. And somebody hit me with a 2x4 on the side of the head, and I went, oh, nobody's going to change the data model they're using for their data at rest. They've been implementing that since 1965, and it is what it is, and too much invested in that. But some of the ideas here in NIEM is one, the idea that fine, your data's at rest and what you need that's optimal for your operations and mission. But data as it moves, NIEM provides a way to standardize data as it moves. So like an address, I have an address in one standard, you have another. We are in free text, I'm in whatever. And NIEM says that here's an address specification. So you write from your system one time, hit the NIEM specification, then everybody can consume it. And what it gets you out is this one-to-many problem where, I'm going to write, if I got 20 partners I need to share my data with, I got to write 20 different ways to extract, and transfer my data to you. Instead, I'm just going to hit the NIEM specification, and then I've just done it once and I'm good. So it's a powerful tool. It's behind disaster.gov and other federal government operations. And it represents an approach, I think, towards standards it's interesting to think about as well. And then the last piece I'd like to say here about standards is this tension that I feel like I'm saying, oh, here are all these problems and no answers. So here's another one. This tension between what I call the purest sort of standard, and we're going to define everything down to, the final, colon and period, versus the need to be able to localize things and at a local level have some additional control to be able to put an extension on, or you need a little bit of flexibility for this or that. So I think as we get into these standards things, always trying to understand that they can't be completely rigid or they will break, particularly in a time of need. And there needs to be some built-in thinking about flexibility. And a couple of minutes left here. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, a very big use case, emergency management, which I'm seeing, I think within DHS, we see as a big issue. We talk a lot about, the first responder community, the PSAPs, things like that. One of the areas, particularly when you start thinking about what's going on at the local government level, we're probably not thinking enough about is how emergency managers are going to be supported in the future by all these types of data, AI and other things. How do we go about that? And for those of you, this is kind of the standard definition of emergency management, but it's a huge job these folks are doing, right? And the expectation under the national preparedness goal is that, it says at the bottom, we're going to leverage whole community, bottom to top, top to bottom, sideways, peer to peer. It's a lot of organizations, a lot of coordination. And there's all these different groups here. If I'm, if I'm Harris County or Houston, right? It's one thing, I've got kind of a budget and things. If I'm, what's the name of a very rural county in Texas? Help. Nobody knows one. There's not a rural county in Texas. Okay. How am I going to handle that? the interdependencies emergency management is starting to have are really growing. Just a list of some of the people that they're expected to deal with. And this is not just in planning, right? When something happens, and when something happens, you better know all these people. How are you going to interoperate? How are you going to get together? How are you going to share information? What's that look like? So it's becoming an increasingly complex environment. And these are the types of things that if you look at a emergency manager's job description, you'll see in them, incredibly busy. And again, thinking about, not the major cities and counties in the US, but our more rural, the smaller communities. How do we deal with this? How do we use AI, emerging technologies to do these types of things? How does interoperability allow us to scale organizations? If a rural county has a disaster that can't happen, can a virtual ESC in New York City support them? How do we make those things happen? The threat landscape, it's just increasing. I mean, again, even thinking back 20 years, right? I don't think emergency managers had on their planning that there could be a ransomware attack that was going to shut down their local hospital, local power grid. How do these things happen? Natural disasters, increased severe weather. The number of emergencies that we're seeing has doubled since the year 2000. So a lot going on, and then just the diversity of things that people are dealing with. Ransomware attacks. I know it's a trend to go out with your rifle and shoot up your local, power generation plant or something. Anyway, school shootings. These are all things that end up on your emergency manager's plate. Fentanyl, immigration. Who's dealing with people in the streets. Extreme heat. This is kind of one of the. You hear about the frog in the pot. You boil the frog and he doesn't know that he's boiling. So there's a lot of these slow moving kind of crises. By the end of the century, people are predicting that we could see over 100,000 excess heat deaths by the end of the century, let alone loss to agriculture, labor time, other types of heat related injuries. How are we thinking about these types of things? Within theme of the Stafford Act, we focus more on acute emergencies. Hurricane Harvey happened, we respond. The tundra's melting in the Arctic, and the homes are collapsing up there. It's happening over years. Not something that we necessarily look at. So a lot of issues out there, and just maybe kind of leave you with this, in my mind at least, interoperability. What it boils down to, I think, in many cases, is can we get the right information securely to the right decision maker in time to make a difference? I think that's a lot of what this is about, and there's a lot else that goes on in the interoperability space. But at the end of the day, if we can accomplish this in the emergency management space, we're going to save a lot of lives. We're going to protect a lot of property. There'll be a lot of citizens. They're going to be a lot happier, and we can reduce the burden and impact of these things that are coming our way. So I think that takes me to about time, and appreciate your time today. And if you have any hard questions, John, Kwang, and Sridhar are here for you. Thank you.
We're gonna leave the stage, by the way. Let me present one of our challenge coins to you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, I guess before you run off, Dan, are there any questions for Dan from the audience? Perfectly explained. Everything's just hunky-dory. Giga, there you go. Okay, so now we have a break, I believe, till 3:15. So please take advantage of the networking opportunities I mentioned earlier, and enjoy some of the refreshments out there.